Hey, Miss Cromer here, and we are going to talk about one of my favorite parts of the research planning process, which is source synthesizing and just differentiating and deciding whether to quote, paraphrase, or summarize our sources. So we're going to jump right in because I want to try to do this as quickly as possible. All right, so understanding the difference between quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing is really important. So, quoting is using the exact same words. Anytime you use the exact words from your source, so if you are highlighting, copying, pasting, and you're putting it in your paper, that needs to be directly quoted. And the way that we indicate that it's directly quoted is with quotation marks. Okay. Paraphrasing is when you restate an entire passage in your own words. So the original meaning is intact, and you will, of course, cite the source just like you will with the other two methods. And it shows a really deep understanding of the material. And essentially, you're just going word for word and choosing your own word to replace a word that's already there. And then summarizing is condensing the information. So you're going to pull out the main idea, the overarching theme, the key data, if you will, if it's something more scientific, and you are just going to tell your reader what that source boils down to. Bottom line information. So you might be taking an entire page or 3 pages and condensing it down to one sentence, even. And again, using your own words, again, citing the source. So let's look at that a little bit more and kind of talk about how to decide. Am I going to quote? Am I going to paraphrase? Or am I going to summarize? So, quoting is what you'll do if you are reading something from your source and you are like, oh, I just can't say it any better, or every single word in here is important. And changing the wording would just distract from this idea. Or maybe it's one of those, it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's good the way it is, so let's leave it exactly as it is. So I'm putting it in quotation marks and I don't have to touch it. So this is, if something is really memorable, if something is worded really well, if it's just chef's kiss, you don't want to ruin it, then quote it, right? So down at the bottom of each of these columns, I've got a percentage, and I'm going to talk more about that ratio in a minute. So I'm going to just move on to paraphrasing, but I will come back to that percentage in a second. Paraphrasing is you showing your understanding of the material, right? You are able to read it and then in your own voice, in your own words, relay the same message. So you have to really understand something in order to be able to do that and to do it well. And then summarizing, you are just, like we said, funneling down. So all of this was said. Basically, what it means is XYZ, right? So again, you have to understand it pretty well to be able to do that. Um, Getting that background information in that might be needed for your readers is a really great way to utilize summarizing, because you don't need to directly quote background information and you don't need to word for word paraphrase the background information. You just need to say, oh, hey, by the way, it's important for you to know 200 years ago, this happened. 30 years ago, this happened. Now we're here, right? So you can summarize things like that pretty easily. A good paper has all three of these, a good research paper, okay? And so now I'm going to talk about these percentages, and they are Miss Cromer's methodology, okay? This is not written in stone anywhere, but the gist of it is, right? You don't want to quote heavy paper. You don't want a research paper that doesn't have any quotes. So you need a good mix of these three things. So my general rule of thumb is 20, 30, 30. Okay. And so that is 20% quotes. So 20% of your paper, word for word. 30% of your paper is you conveying every single thought that your source has in your own words. And then 30% of your paper is you saying this source boils down to this. And then that leaves a good chunk of percentage, right? So if we've got 60% paraphrasing and summarizing and 20% quoting, that means you still have 20% left in your paper. And that's where you're going to connect the dots. That is where you are going to show why the evidence supports the claim. So you make the claim, You present evidence through one of these three methods to basically argue and to prove your point that these people who know what they're talking about also agree. And then you make it make sense for your reader in your own words. So that's the other 20%. All right. Oops. That's not what I want to do. Okay, so let's just kind of practice this really quickly just so that you can see the difference between a direct quote, which would be this original text on the left, a paraphrase, and a summary. So if the original text is, many people find that taking a brief walk during the workday helps improve their focus and reduces stress. Even a 10-minute walk can provide notable benefits, right? So even just like it is with those quotation marks, that's a direct quote. I'm leaving it word for word the way it was worded in my source, and I just put it inside quotation marks. I'm done, right? That's a direct quote. A paraphrase is the same length, the same ideas, but it's your own words. So I've reworded it to, a short walk in the middle of the workday can help people concentrate better and feel less stressed. Just 10 minutes of walking can make a meaningful difference. I've got the same exact idea. I have 3 lines of words. And that doesn't matter as much as like you don't have to, okay, many people, most folks, right? You don't have to be that detailed and that like zoomed in, but it is supposed to be word for word. You're not making it shorter, you're not making it longer, you're relaying the same idea, the same message in your own words. Okay, so kept all the original ideas, I reworded and I even restructured sentences, I moved things around to make it my own. And then there's a similar level of detail because I'm taking A and turning it into B. Okay. And then a summary is a shortened version that focuses just on the main idea. Short walks during the workday can boost focus and reduce stress. Much shorter, includes just the main idea, and it omits little details like 10 minutes and noticeable benefits. Okay, move my face so you can see that. And so that is a very concise example of a quote versus a paraphrase versus a summary. Hopefully that helps seeing it out like that. And for the sake of time, I'm skipping over this because I want to show you your 2 templates that your English teachers have given you, and you can take these and you can just plug in your information, remove what's there if you're using the outline on the right, and put in, so where it says central question posed, right? That's where you put in your central question. You highlight that and start typing your central question for each of those lines. If you're using this graphic organizer on the left, you just start plugging in your source information, what you think your thesis will be, what types of things you want to cover in your introduction, so what background information you want to give. And then where it says body, I would do like what we have here on the right. I would do your first body paragraph, what you want to talk about, and then plug in any of your research notes like, ooh, this data from this source really answers this question, so that's got to go in this paragraph, right? So this is your time to really start writing your paper. And the more work you put into this planning and synthesizing, then the easier writing your paper will be. Okay? Reach out to your English teacher if you have any questions. Hope this helps.